Well, welcome to our Red Feather Mind Body Spirit interview event. I'm Christopher McClure, and special guest, author, and scholar Dina Saalisi. Dina is most recently the creator, together with Audrey Violet, of Listening to Flowers, just in a beautiful deck. Positive affirmations to invoke the healing energy of the 38 Bach flowers. We're going to catch up today to learn more about this amazing deck and how to use it, but what's ahead. But first, a little background on Dina. Dina Saalisi is a holistic healer and who guides others in creating optimal well-being of mind, body, and spirit. Her certifications include the National Board of Health, a wellness coach, a master flower essence practitioner, and certified hypnotherapist. She lives in California with her family and two pups. What kind of pups, by the way? That's off topic, but what kind of what kind of pups are they?
They're cockapoos and they're very sweet. We also have a hairless cat, I'd like to add.
One of those hairless cats. Is that the official name of the hairless cat? Is that what they're called, or are they?
That's what they're called Sphinx cats, I guess, but they're more like puppies than they are like cats. That's a whole other topic, but I love it.
Maybe for a different discussion. Yes. Today, we're talking about listening to flowers. So it's a fascinating topic. And I knew I've heard of them before this, but I don't know a lot. I've learned more, through this process. So we'll start at the beginning. What are the Bach flower remedies? And just for the audience, sometimes they're called Bach, sometimes batch. And so we discussed that. I think it depends on the locale. So you can even discuss that if you'd like. So what are they really, in a nutshell? What are the Bach flower?
Thanks. Yeah, thank you for that, Chris. Well, the Bach or the batch remedies, depending where we are in the world, they are a system of self-healing, I would say, that's about 100 years old. And, I make the distinction that it's a self-healing method because, flower remedies, what are they, right? So, when I think of say herbal remedies, my from years and years ago, my background was in herbalism, and I was always fascinated with the healing energy of plants, namely flowers. Obviously, I'm endeared to flowers, but so the way herbal remedies work, right? They work by using the physical properties of a plant to treat a physiological disturbance, right? And they heal you. Well, flower remedies are sort of different in that they use the subtle energy from the flower. So they're more akin to homeopathy, say, than they are to herbalism.
Gotcha.
And they treat the subtle energy of the person. So in this regard, the subtle energy that we're talking about is emotions, challenging emotions. So what we do is we use a remedy, we take it internally, and it helps to shift the imbalance that we might be feeling around specific challenging emotions.
Okay. That's fascinating. So you mentioned the emotional challenges. It's broken down, as I understand it, into 7 categories mainly of emotional challenges. So what are they? And they have very unique kind of verbalizations, of them. Actually, it's really fascinating, and the way that they kind of draws you into understanding them more. So what are those categories of emotional challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are 7 categories that Dr. Bach put all of the 38 remedies into. And some of them are self-explanatory, like the first 2, fear. We can all relate to fear. Uncertainty, I think that's a big one for many people. But then there are sort of interesting languaging, like around insufficient interest in present circumstances, which that kind of sounds wordy and funny, but when you break it down, it's really about lack of focus or attention, which is also a big one, right? Today, very relevant.
Definitely.
Then there's loneliness, oversensitivity to influences and ideas. Again, I feel like all of these categories are super relevant today, even though they were coined nearly 100 years ago. But like oversensitivity, that's a big one that I myself recognize and that I hear from people, like feeling sensitive to energy. And then there's despondency or despair, which is sort of self-explanatory. And then overcare for the welfare of others, which, again, that's sort of a funny languaging, but I like to look at those sort of as the relationship flowers. Like if we're over caring for others, how does that, sort of land in us?
Right. Yeah. The way that they are worded is very, I think, indicative of the time initially, being 100 years old. And I guess you would have kind of cut his teeth in, late Victorian era, after that and all of that too. And so, but I think that the way they are is, even though they are a little more wordy, but they're still precise. Sometimes sometimes it's better to say several, have a longer explanation right in the different state there as well too. So really fascinating. So Dr. Bach himself, so what's his story? How did he get into this whole area of flower therapy and remedies?
Yeah, well, he was a very successful physician in London in the 30s circa. And he was a really deep human being. I mean, like he was sort of on the forefront of homeopathy. Samuel Hahnemann, who was the father of homeopathy, was, I believe, the late 1800s. And then Bach was also a homeopath. And I think what happened was, my understanding is that he really felt sort of bereft of looking at people's emotional challenge. And so he'd been seeing patients. And one of the things that he recognized, which was sort of coming up in the 30s, with Carl Jung was, the great philosopher who was kind of talking about how emotions and how we think affect our well-being. So Bach really ran with that. He was like, I don't like prescribing medications, the same medication to somebody, maybe two different people might have the same illness, but they're going to react differently. And they have that illness. So he really recognized what we kind of understand it now, but how our emotions and our thoughts and the stories we tell ourselves govern our ability to heal. So he actually left his practice in London, which was highly successful. He was really a successful guy. He wrote books. He was a bacteriologist, and he left. And he went out into the Welsh Highlands, and he had a little stone cottage where he built his own furniture. And he felt really sure that he could work with the agents of nature in a simpler way. And again, like I said, he was a homeopath, so he understood subtle energy medicine. And what he did is, my understanding is that he sort of went around and he worked with his own emotional challenges. So what he recognized within himself, he kind of sort of hunted out in the field for the flowers that would sort of transform his emotions. And, I imagine there was a lot of trial and error. We don't really know, exactly what went down in his private time alone out there on the wildland. But I think what happened was that he used the flowers. He discovered that he could take the energy, he could use the flowers and get the energy by using the heat of the sun to catalyze them. And that's an ancient principle, right? That's not really anything new. But in the field he was working as a physician, that was sort of, kind of off to the margin there. And so he extracted the essence from each flower with sunlight, and then he bottled them and he made them into remedies. He preserved them and made them into remedies. And then he recognized that he took them internally and he noticed a shift in his consciousness. And then he went back and used them on patients. So that's the thing that's amazing to me, is people who had no idea what he was doing, they loved him as a doctor. They did it and it worked. And so, that to him was enough proof. And I believe that his whole process took about 6 years before he came up with this 38 flower system. And when he died, he deemed it to be perfect in its simplicity and in the ability that each of us could use it on our own, that we didn't need a doctor to prescribe it for us.
Right, exactly. That's a fascinating process. So I was going to ask you, as he was going through that, initially, I'd imagine the responses are his own, and then over trial and error with his patients and so forth, and trying these out, he really would have zeroed in and honed in that process to see what worked for whom and the emotional responses in that, and it's still relevant, very much relevant today to as a form of alternative medicine for sure, in a way that could really just help people in a very gentle way too. So the process is interesting. I guess the flowers were they were floated in water or something, and then used the sunlight to kind of distill that. Could you explain that a little more?
Exactly. And that's not that different from herbal remedies. Like, I don't know if you know how herbal remedies are made, but we use the plants and then we extract them in alcohol, and the alcohol extracts the physical properties.
Right.
So this is a little different in that using the sunlight to catalyze the energy. So the whole process takes about 3 or 4 hours. I've made remedies myself, not so much to use as medicine, but more to have the experience, because it's like a really great experience. And when I teach, that's one of the homework assignments I give. Go and make a remedy, because you don't, it's just like, growing a tomato from seed, saying, rather than picking a tomato off the vine. Like, you love that tomato. It's delicious. You can appreciate that it grew in the ground. But when you start a plant from seed, you get to witness the whole process.
Right.
And thereby, be more in tune with it. So that's why I kind of, have that as a homework assignment. But it's truly beautiful. Like, anyone who's ever seen the bowl of water with the flowers in it, and you can kind of like, I'm mesmerized by it every single time I sit there and I just look at it. And then the other thing I like to do is, after I take the flowers out, I like to taste a bit of each remedy I make before I preserve it. And the thing that's crazy to me is they each taste completely different. And even though it's a very subtle, like the amount of energy that's in the water, that's in the patterning of the water, is very subtle, it feels very powerful.
I'm sure. Yeah, no, that's fascinating. And you described one instance, I think maybe what drew you to that. I want to kind of get how you became, when it's probably a natural progression really from herbalist into this. I mean, that's not a huge leap there. So, but you described some really magical experience you had, where you watched it kind of happen on the leaves or something, I think. What was your first initial kind of, what was that like?
Yeah, well, it has been a long progression. I mean, I grew up in New Jersey, and we used to go into Greenwich Village in New York City in the late 80s. And we used to go to the metaphysical bookstores. And, back then, and I don't know how it is now, but in New Jersey where I grew up, there was like really no discussion of alternative healing or energy medicine. It was very marginalized. And so I would go into these metaphysical bookshops and I would just be like, wow, this is great. There's all these books and, these things that we can do to help ourselves. And so I found Bach's book, Heal Thyself, and I got a copy of it, and I was sold. I was like, wow, you can use the energy of flowers to heal. And so I kind of dabbled in it and played around with it, and I saw, some progress. But it wasn't for many years, till many years later. So, this was about 25 years ago. I worked on an organic flower farm with some friends of mine, and we'd get up at the crack of dawn and we would cut flowers for bouquets. And these friends of mine were very spiritual, holistic people, and they would teach me about cutting the flowers. We would only cut this percentage of the plant, and you would leave this to grow. And I remember I would go out into the field in the morning, and the sun would be hitting down on the dew on the leaves, and it creates like this rainbow effect kind of when the sun hits it. And it's magical, the way a rainbow in the sky is magical. I mean, it's there, we take it for granted, but do we really know, what it is? And I would be like, sort of communing with the flowers in this way and recognizing how each of them was completely different. And then it dawned on me something that I had read in Bach's realizations was that the dew on the petals is containing the energy of the flower because the sun is catalyzing it. Right. And when he first started doing it, he began by collecting the dew off the petals, but then he quickly realized, I can't really bottle that. That's kind of labor intensive. Right. But that was how he first worked with the energy, was like the actual dew on the petals.
Okay. That's really neat. That's very inspirational. I'm sure that was a really, the progression is quite fascinating there, and it's stuck with you all this time, and this is become such a big part of your life. How did this become then a deck? How did you fuse this all together, with the artist then, and how did that happen?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. Well, so like I said, I'd been working with the remedies for, more than 30 years. And then about 7 years ago, I decided to go through the Bach training. I was like, I was doing health coaching at the time. And I was like, this is such a great system. I would really love to be able to marry the two things, doing meeting with clients as a health coach and then also offering them this alternative therapy.
Mhm.
And so when I was in Bach school, I kind of took it upon myself. I was like, well, I've always been a writer and I love haiku poetry, the 3-line stanzas.
Yeah.
And I was like, what would it be like if I took each flower and in helping myself to learn what they're for, if I would write like little 3-line affirmations for each one.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I began doing this to learn about them. And then the more I was doing it, the more I was like, wow, this is really great. Like, I wish I could make a book or something about it.
Yeah.
And Audrey Violet is a friend of mine. And at the time, she was also a student of mine.
Okay.
And it's funny because I always am like, looking toward my students for like, how do you see this system and what can you add to it? Or what do you have to teach me? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew her as this fantastic artist. And at the time, I think she was like 21 or something. She's super young. And I asked her if she would be interested in drawing each flower. And she was like, oh my God, I would love that.
Yeah.
And so we decided what we would do is I would keep writing the affirmations. And what I was doing too is I was taking the remedy, sort of reflecting and then writing the affirmations. And I told her, you could take the remedy and then just kind of come up with a drawing. And let's not compare notes till we're done, because I didn't want either thing to like, kind of get in the way of each other's process.
Right. Right.
And when we were done with it and we sat and we looked at the drawings and we paired up the affirmations, we were both just blown away. Like, it's a complete labor of love.
Mm-hmm.
And we had no idea where it was going. I mean, it could have just been an art project and we would have been fine with that.
Mm-hmm.
But then my son, he's actually a writer and he is a master's in writing. He has his master's in writing. He encouraged me to write up a proposal and shop it around. And the rest is sort of history with you. And then you picked it up, and I guess it was you whose idea it was to make it a card deck. That really hadn't occurred to me.
That's right. Yeah, I think it might have even come in. Was it black and white first too, or was
Yes, it was. Yeah.
It came in black and white first, I think, and we just sat with it for a while. But I knew there was something that was really special here, and the way it's come out is just beautiful. The deck, it's it's a nice little package here, and very nicely written book that's fully illustrated there, and the cards in themselves, they have a really nice feeling to them. So basically what it is, it's the image on the front, so it's the first one here, the rock rose on the front, and then just the affirmation then on the back that you had written there too. It's a really beautiful blending, and they really, I think, speak to the time when they were first invented, when it all came together there. It really captures, I think, from my at the time more limited understanding of the process and everything there and what the history was. But I think it's really captured everything really beautifully, and will make for a really great tool for people to help to heal themselves in this really, amazing way. So that's a really neat story, how it came together there too. So what lies ahead? What's up next for you here with this?
Yeah, well, there is a lot that lies ahead. I have another book coming out next year, The Art of Flower Therapy, which is going to be basically a comprehensive guide on how to work with the energy of flowers. So that's really exciting because many people ask me about that. And then as far as the Oracle deck goes, I also have a class, a Listening to Flowers workshop. And so some other exciting things. I have a healing art studio that I'm in the process of opening in the Napa Valley in California. Great. And so that'll be up and running full time by next fall. But I do anticipate that this coming spring, I'm going to do Listening to Flowers workshops there. Mm-hmm. And so the way I see it is, it's like, this isn't your typical Oracle deck where you just kind of draw a card and look for, look for where it's leading you. Mm-hmm. It's more about confirming what we already know, but also where we need to work. And that's one of the things I love about these affirmations is, like, in giving them to my clients, that they can see not only what resonates, like where the affirmations feel really relevant, but where they feel stuck. And that's another great way I think affirmations work. Like, what are the words that are hard for us to say? Because that also directs us into where we need to, like, sort of change our mindset. So the class, it'll probably be like a half-day workshop, and it'll really reflect on, like, where we can look at setting intentions and manifesting our goals through the lens of the flowers. So that's really exciting.
That's
And
great.
then I also offer one-on-one healing sessions for people. Yeah.
Fantastic. So it's all healing all the time, basically. It sounds like
All the time, all healing all the time.
it's a real it's a real calling to you. So speaking of that, you just go back a little bit to the emotional the states there too. The way that the book is laid out, I think is really brilliant. It goes, step by step through each state, and it talks about those flower remedies that kind of like speak to those there. So starting with fear, you have the rock rock rose, amelia, cherry plum, aspen, and red chestnut, kind of bunched together, and a little explanation of why they kind of come together there too. So you really get a really nice introduction to like what these are. To even in the material in the front of the book, there you talk about your journey, but also Dr. Bach, himself too, and what brought him to that too. So anyone who wants to learn really, about the process, but also about how these can be, a really great healing tool for you. It's kind of like all like packaged in one little spot for you there. So that's great. So if people wanted to follow you in social media, can your readers and followers interact with you, or websites or things like that?
Absolutely. So my website is just my name, dinasaalisi.com, and all my social media handles are Dina Saalisi Healing Arts. So, and as far as I know, I'm the only Dina Saalisi in the world, because my last name is a combination of mine and my husband's. So it's a very unique, made-up last name. So I'm out there and you can find me. And I look forward to, I love connecting with anyone who's interested. So I welcome emails. I welcome messages on my direct messaging on my Instagram. So I'm totally available to be there for others, because I really believe in this system and I believe in self-healing. And, that's the thing is, it's like when people come to see me for healing sessions, it's not so much about getting a client as it is about turning a client into a student who can then help themselves, right? That to me is what's really important.
Exactly. And actually that brings kind of full circle back to Dr. Bach's, which was your introduction, Heal Thyself. So it helps someone to heal themselves. So that's full circle. Wonderful. Great. Well, thanks for taking this time here, Dina. It's been really amazing talking with you and learning more about this really amazing little deck here. So thanks for everyone who's tuning into this interview there. It won't be the last one, I'm sure. We'll have more in the future as well. So Listening to Flowers, it's available on Red Feather Mind Body Spirit MBS.com and wherever Mind Body Spirit items are sold. Also trade books as well. You can pick up your local bookstore as well on Amazon. Anywhere you want to get it, you can get it. So many thanks to everyone here. Thank you again, Dina, and everyone have a beautiful day.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.